I did it very light this time, light touch. Welcome, everyone. I now call the March 7th, 2023 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The City of Bothell is now providing the option of attending council meetings remotely or in person. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Verbal comments may be taken either in person or remotely. Sign-up sheets were provided online by the City Clerk's office via link from the agenda. A call-in phone number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device. If a participant fails to mute their connection and causes a disruption to the meeting, the connection will be terminated. For our study session and consent agenda this evening, we will recess and move to room 107 and adjourn the meeting from there. For those of you in the audience, room 107 has some seating for the public, and the meeting will continue to be broadcast in both council chambers and the lobby. For virtual attendees, because room 107 is Teams enabled, you will need to use the Teams link provided on the first page of the agenda. As a reminder, you can also watch the meeting on our YouTube or BCTV without having to break your connection. At this point, we will take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Councilmember Zorns?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alders?
Here.
Councilmember McNeil?
Here.
Councilmember Mankey?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And for council attending remotely, use the raise hand feature when you wish to speak. Note that due to the fact that there is an item on the consent agenda related to the middle housing study session, the consent calendar will be addressed after tonight's study session. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to presentations, reports, and briefings, and we'll start with public engagement opportunities. All right, you can help reduce food waste by taking an online survey today. Food waste makes up over 1/5 of household waste. Help us create programming to reduce food waste by taking King County's online survey. You can learn more at publicinput.com/SWD. We have another middle housing walking tour Saturday, March 18th at 10 a.m. You can join city staff for conversations about the proposals while we look at existing examples of middle housing types like duplexes, triplexes, and ADUs. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/middle housing walking tour. Keys, wallet, phone, cup. Join fellow Eastside residents who are choosing to reuse. Participate by bringing your own cup to participating coffee shops and by entering to win a personal reuse toolkit. You can learn more at bothellwa.gov/BYOC. All right. Next up, we have a proclamation for Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Whereas on February 26, 1987, President Ronald Reagan officially proclaimed March National Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, calling for understanding, encouragement, and opportunities to help persons with developmental disabilities lead productive and fulfilling lives. And whereas we recognize the many accomplishments of people with a developmental disability, who are of all racial, ethnic, educational, social, and economic backgrounds, and who are contributing neighbors, coworkers, classmates, voters, friends, and valued members of our community. And whereas we acknowledge there are systemic barriers that reduce the likelihood of those with disabilities enjoying equitable experiences and living independent, productive lives within their communities, including full access to education, housing, employment, and recreational activities. And whereas we strive to increase awareness and the openness to learn and acknowledge each individual's contributions and change the attitudes and beliefs about the abilities of those with developmental disabilities. And whereas we recognize that equitable experiences and full inclusion is a matter of social justice and a shared responsibility of everyone to create welcoming and supporting environments, policies, and systems for all. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in the City of Bothell and promote both the expectations and opportunities for individuals with developmental disabilities to be successful and independent members of their communities, because we recognize that our communities are stronger when everyone participates. And I believe we have Robert Miller here to speak and accept the proclamation. Thank you. This is yours. And you've already got that turned on and you're ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for including us all in celebrating today's proclamation for Disability Awareness Month in Bothell. My name is Robert Frederick Miller, and I was born special, as my mom put it. Disability can mean many things to many people, as long as everyone takes a moment to be aware of everyone's ability. We're all become better neighbors and citizens. For more than 6 years, I've enjoyed all of my classes with the North Shore Wranglers Inclusion Program, especially the Ambassador Group, where our abilities are welcomed and celebrated, where we reach out to our community and help celebrate the unique and abilities all year long. Thanks again, Mr. Mayor, for proclaiming March Disability Awareness Month. And I can tell you how important it is for citizens and to be included in all areas of life. In order to be included, everyone must be aware of the importance of differences.
Robert, thank you so much for coming to accept today. We really appreciate it. All right, moving on to the city manager report, unless anything has changed.
No, Mayor, no report tonight, although we'll have plenty of time to visit throughout the agenda. And I do just want to echo, Robert, thank you so much for being here tonight. It was great to have you.
All right, council committee reports. Seeing none, the city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but upon the advice of our city attorney, we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk?
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. We had no written comments submitted this evening. However, I will note that we did receive a number of comments outside of our sign-up process, and all of those have been forwarded to the Community Development Department. They're all on middle housing, and they will be made part of the record. We do have 4 people who have signed up to speak tonight, and the first person is Ruth Burris. When you come up to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes, and the light at the dais will turn green. At 1 minute, it'll start blinking, and then turn yellow at 30 seconds. So if Ruth Burris is here, which I do not see her, so we'll move on. The next person we have is Eric Murray.
There we go. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good to see you all again. Thanks for having me. Glad to come here. I'm actually not coming to talk about Cascadia. I'm coming to talk about you tonight. So a bit of thanks and some encouragement. So it's about the vision and priorities that you'll be discussing in more depth tonight. And I want to thank you, number one, for including the campus as part of your vision. And specifically, you say, in economic vitality, working closely with Cascadia College and the University of Washington Bothell to collaborate to develop strategies and programs that contribute to economic and cultural vitality. Very much appreciate that this relationship that we're building is coming closer and closer together. The second one of these visions and priorities that I want to emphasize is connecting neighbors, developing a housing strategy incorporating opportunities for a variety of housing types to serve all income levels. And this is where I want to offer some encouragement. Cascadia, as you may know, has suffered kind of an enrollment crisis. In one portion of our population, we have lost about 500 international students through the course of the pandemic and geopolitical affairs. What they tell us now post-pandemic is that they really need housing opportunities that are close to campus. Cascadia is not a part of the UW-Bothell housing residence halls that are being created right now. We don't have housing. But in order for us to attract back some of these international students, which could provide a lot of economic vitality and an ability for Cascadia to regain some of our lost finances, any opportunity we have to create housing that meets the needs of students around Cascadia is going to be vitally important to us. And students' needs may be different than our general community. We don't need as much parking or any parking for some of our international students. Our students can live in micro studios. Our students don't need some of the typical housing opportunities that are out there. So given restrictions and rules and regulations, what I would like to encourage you to do is to think openly as different developers and potential opportunities come forward, asking for the ability to build around Cascadia. If we can make room for them, it'll help Cascadia grow and likewise help the city. So thank you for entertaining that, and I hope we can continue this good relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mark Swanson.
My mom watched my last week's pitch. She said I needed to be nicer. This is my attempt at that. I graduated from WSU in 1989 with a mechanical engineering degree, an agricultural engineering degree, and I'm one class short of a minor in math. I took chemical engineering control systems as electives. I understand soil mechanics, runoff. I've done all kinds of calculations on flood control. The bottom line is I'm studied in some of the concerns that the city has. So in 1991, I made the decision to move to Bothell. The decisions made in Federal Way were kind of written in stone. You could see the future. I might start with the fact that Federal Way has 5 times the violent crime as Bothell, 5 per 1,000 versus 1 for us. That 91% of the elementary school that I went to is under the state poverty line. And what was the call, the clarion call in Federal Way? When I graduated 6th grade in 1972, affordable housing. Now, I don't want to see what happened to Federal Way happen here. I decided to buy a house in Bothell in 1994, 5 years after I graduated, with these engineering degrees. I was making $38,500 as a salary. My house cost $195,000. I floated a $195,000 8.25% interest note. You do the math. So I heard last year's commentary about affordable housing. In 1991, when I rented a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment at Beardsley Cove at Beardsley Boulevard Apartments, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, $700. The minimum wage was $425. It took 164 hours for paying at minimum wage that apartment. Today, the minimum wage in Bothell is $13.69. That same 164-hour labor correlation means that my apartment in Beardsley Cove at $700 in 1991 is equal to $2,250 now.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
I see that my time has expired. I've got much more to say, but I do want to end with this. Please follow Patrick Ewan's recommendation to the council of February 7th. He says it all for me. Review it, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Carl Wellstein.
Hello, I'm back again. All right, I'm here to speak out to save single-family residential zoning. This, under the radar proposed middle housing code changes eliminate single-family zoning citywide. The Bothell Planning Commission's very own survey of residents illustrated people do not want middle housing to be implemented. Do not listen to outsiders, but rather the people who voted some of you into office. We should be proud and protective of our wonderful, diverse community and not make it a highly dense and personal community and culture and associated culture. I like Bothell's environment as it is, and this middle housing initiative will surely erode and eventually destroy its quaint nature. Not enough transparency on eliminating single-family zoning. City Council has not adequately informed the citizens of Bothell the terrible impact this citywide middle housing will bring. You know, last meeting, the mayor went on and on about, you know, the council has been discussing this for years, but there's been no flyers to all the citizens. You know, it was encouraging in that meeting that sanity eventually prevailed and an informational flyer and community interaction meetings that were going to happen. But yay. Higher density will increase crime, congestion, noise, create ill will between neighbors, right? Imagine your neighbor decides to put up 6 houses, you know, 30 feet high right next door to yours. You're creating tremendous stress on the citizens rushing on this. People are busy working, spending time with their families, and they expect the council to do the right thing for them and not non-Bothell citizens and developers. Council is now also on board with, to me, deceiving the citizens at middle housing walking tours, formerly run by a middle housing advocacy group. I went on one and was kind of very biased in favor of middle housing, but more importantly, deceptive in showing homes on wide streets, parking on both sides, and alleys behind those homes. Very little of Bothell is like that. It also gives the appearance that the council has already decided on this middle housing initiative. Growth has spiraled already in Bothell. The Times building area has something like 1,000 units. Between 185th and 240th and Bothell River Highway, there's around 250 units going in. Something around 50 units just down the street here from City Hall. You know, I've traded emails with some of the council members. When I spoke of being open to compromise on this, the email stopped. Apparently, compromise is a verboten term. Why is the council even considering this? Middle housing initiative is an attack on Bothell's small town culture and Bothell families. It's the families that desire the small town culture to raise their children. Don't attack these desirable family values with middle housing densities. We do not want the insane chaos that plagues Seattle migrating to Bothell. Stick to the contract that we homeowners used and purchase our Bothell homes. That means the present zoning laws. There's plenty of wiggle room there to add ADUs. It allows rational growth already. No one-sided autocratic code changes. Keep density low and save Bothell single-family zoning. I have a list of 6 items here. I know you guys want them itemized, but 1 is do not destroy the small town culture and character. 2, no citywide implementation. 3, no reduced parking. Oh, you won't get the other 3. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Wellstein. That's all I have signed up this evening. However, I see people want to raise it. Go ahead. State your name when you get to the podium, please. And if you're in the virtual audience and would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Justin Buffard. I've been here a few times in support of middle housing. I just want to kind of keep expressing both my support for it and what I've heard in the field. So far, most of the people who have reached out again is to help house either their parents or someone else, better development for ADUs. And I talked to one of my friends, and his exact quote was, "Parking is the death of all affordable housing." I think the city's proposal is better than the state one. The state one is already past first or second reading at this point. I think it's fairly likely to pass, but I think Bothell setting its own course is the right thing to do and kind of getting ahead. And if I read the red legislation correctly, the state legislature is open to cities setting their own direction and approving that plan versus sort of imposing their will. It's sort of like congressional saber rattling, you know, when some big company does something wrong, Congress says, well, if you don't do it right, we're going to do something about it, and then they finally do the right thing. So I think the city is right in getting ahead a little bit here. As far as like trying to implement it, I just ran through the scenario myself. One of the big takeaways, and on advice of the city manager, I will confirm with staff, but it certainly seems that permitting fees are going to be quite high for something that is relatively simple. In my case, it'd be a garage conversion ADU. If I didn't include the sewer, which I would say most people are on, it would be somewhere in the range of $8,000, which is pushing well over 10% of the cost of performing this action. So it's actually quite high. And in fact, the biggest one is the parks impact fee, which is higher than the traffic impact fee. I just think the parks one just doesn't have any sort of adjustment for ADU versus not ADU, and the traffic one does. The traffic impact fee is like $11,000 for a single family home, but like $2,000 for an EDU. So I think it's a little bit more commensurate to what you're adding. So I know there will be a fee study, so that's great. I just wanted to point out sort of on the, on the floor examples of what I've encountered. And then the other thing is mostly just short plat was another example. It looks like, and again, the council, he asked me to check with staff, but on paper, it looks like any short plat, regardless of complexity, is going to be about $14,000 to $15,000 paid to the great city, which, in some cases is mostly just drawing one line. In some cases, it's way more complicated than that, and I get it. I just think that those fees need to also be re-examined. $14,000 to do a single short plat, 2-lot short plat is a little on the excessive side. So I'm hoping that gets revisited as well. Anyway, thank you, and I hope we can get this done.
Thank you. That's all I have. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? That's all we have, Mayor.
I'd love to speak again.
Sorry, I have actually Mac Carter in the audience, in the virtual audience. We're going to bring him in. Mr. Carter, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Can you hear me?
You go and try to get this. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. So I was only able to go and join in on the last 3 previous comments that were in there because I've been actually ill today. But of what I saw, the things that I wanted to go in to point out is that this process has been going on for well over a year, if not longer. Notification of it's been pretty easy to go and to find if you want to go and bother to look and take part of the community. The other thing that I would go and I'd point out is that I believe in the Seattle Times, there is 13 different bills for this housing to go and to be put through at the state level, which, as the last person went and pointed out, if the city doesn't go and pass what their plans are, then they're more subject to that than anything else. So it's kind of, if you want to have your voice heard and you want something done, you need to get the plans going. The other thing I would go and I would look at is that there was a comment about buying in Bothell at the time that they had and holding to that contract. I live in a neighborhood where I can go and I can see houses that are on lots that are down to 5,000 square feet. I have a home that's almost 16,000 square feet on land, and I'm not allowed to divide it down to 5,000. I can't go and I can't do it. I can't go and match the property next to me that's divided in half. I can't do other things because the current zoning. And this zoning came in later when they went and they did a tightening of the zoning laws, not back when they were doing the 5,000 and things. The 5,000 is historical. That was stuff that was done decades ago. I don't believe people are going to say that Bothell decades ago was a horrible place. All right? And I believe we have one gentleman who talked, he said he moved here back in 1970 or something along that lines. So the point that I want to go and make through is that the delay is costing the citizens. It's not helping. It needs to go and be basically voted, put through, and given, life to go and to breathe. Maybe there needs to be some guidelines. Maybe the city needs to go and help on doing some of the planning, the permitting, and things like that, so that way it's not a total cost to the homeowner, so that way we don't end up with federal way mismatch or unplanned housing that is somehow socially acceptable to people who want to go and live in their single zoned home on a big lot, while everyone else is striving to go and try to get in here and paying close to $1 million. I believe 1.1 was one of the recent median costs of a home in Bothell near the downtown area recently. So I really would like to see this thing go through, something to be done, because I think we're going to miss out in the long term if we don't. And that's all.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next up is projected agenda discussion. Does anybody have an item they'd like to bring up? All right. Moving on to contracts and agreements. Our first agenda bill of the night is Agenda Bill 23031, Consider formally accepting maintenance responsibilities for the Village Square Stormwater Pond in Tract C and relinquishing a drainage easement within Tract B of the Village Square neighborhood. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, and you are correct. This is the one contract and agreement on the agenda tonight under Section 7. We're joined tonight by our surface water engineer, Janet Gear, to present on this topic. And again, the recommended action is to approve the relinquishment of the stormwater access easement in Tract B and authorize execution of a stormwater pond maintenance easement in Tract C. With that, I'll turn it over to Janet.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here this evening just to go over a couple of goals to provide you with a high-level overview of the existing drainage easement, the current status of the WashDOT portion, and the pond maintenance easement request for the Village Square neighborhood. At the end of the presentation, we would like council to consider extinguishing the existing drainage easement on Tract B and accepting the pond maintenance easement for Tract C. So just to give you a little bit of a orientation here, this area down below, this is Tract B. This is the Village Square neighborhood here, and this is the Canyon Park Business Park. And then Tract C is up above, and this is the stormwater pond that we're referring to that we're currently maintaining but don't have a maintenance agreement formally recorded with the county. The WashDOT portion was recently purchased. That's this section here. And they are proposing to put in a stormwater drainage facility as part of their 405 widening project. So just a little bit of history on this. On the plat and within the covenants, ownership and maintenance responsibilities of the common areas of Tract B and C belong to the HOA. When this area was annexed in 1992, the pond was handed to the city from the county by mistake. But when we conducted a legal review in 1995, we determined that we should take on all of the catch basins, pipes, everything within the right-of-way, in addition to the maintenance of that pond. Unfortunately, at that time, we did not actually formally record a maintenance agreement. Let's see. The WashDOT portion taking over at Tract B, at this time, the city determined it was good for us to clear up the documentation and formally relinquish that section in Tract B so that it would only have a portion owned by WashDOT and the other portion owned by the HOA, and then formally take over the maintenance in Tract C so that we're legally allowed to enter the property for maintenance purposes. So again, we're just asking tonight if you would consider extinguishing the existing drainage easement on Tract B and accept the pond maintenance for Tract C so that we can legally access the property. And at this time, we'd like to thank you and open it up for any questions you may have.
I think it might just seem that open and shut.
All right.
If there are no questions, I will entertain a motion. Councilmember Zorns?
I move the recommended action.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Zorns and a second from Councilmember Dodd to approve the relinquishment of the stormwater access easement in Tract B and authorize the city manager to execute the stormwater pond maintenance easement in Tract C. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Next up, thank you, Janet. Appreciate it. Next up is Agenda Bill 23032, approval of the 2023 docket. City Manager?
Thank you. And while I'll often remind council of the last action, this was just last week. So I'm pretty sure that you'll remember. Last week we did have a study session to discuss the docket and to get direction from council. Staff have returned tonight to be able to review the proposed action with you. I believe they're here to answer any questions. I don't know that there's a presentation. It appears not. So, but Ashley Winchell, the Deputy Director of Community Development, is here, as well as the Director of Community Development, Jason Greenspan. In your packet tonight, there is then the outline of what the recommendation is from staff, again, informed by last week's study session. I'll also note that in the agenda bill, there is also the statement which staff will be following up with any of the applicants after council action takes place, including if council declines any of the proposed projects. Staff will be working with those applicants to understand next steps or opportunities that they might have to work with their properties as currently allowed. So with that, I will turn it over to council for discussion, and Ashley's at the table to answer any questions.
Councilmember Zorns.
And this is a circuitous way to say thank you. It's going to be a short question. I just want to confirm that moving the recommended action as it stands, we will be separating the Carlson and Drews.
Correct. We wrote it so it would separate those two as two separate actions.
Okay, perfect. How much do I love you? So thank you very much. That's all I needed to know.
That's probably not the question she was expecting. Deputy Mayor?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Just a quick question. Just to clarify, what does without prejudice mean for those who are watching?
Yeah, so the code essentially has a statement in it that if council does not move forward with one of the requests, that there's a certain amount of time until that request can be made again. If it is not moved forward with without prejudice, that means they could apply in the next year. So that would give them time to continue to talk to staff about their proposal, maybe get something a little more solid put together that would be more ready for consideration in the future. So we added that so that way the applicants wouldn't have to wait. I think it's 5 years.
So there's flexibility there for the folks.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you, Mayor. I just more had a comment. I wanted to show my appreciation and thanks for the work that you guys did in the preparation that you brought to the table and in council for the open study session dialogue. I think it went really well. So I just wanted to show my appreciation. So thank you.
Councilmember Alders?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank you for how well you kind of summarized and reported back what our discussion was last week. I feel like this really, reflects very accurately what we discussed, and so thank you very much for that.
Councilmember Mankey?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you as well, specifically for the additional research into the previously deferred amendments to make sure that we were treating them all fairly. So thank you for follow-up on that.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thank you. I didn't want to be the only one who didn't say thank you. I really appreciate all the work.
You're welcome. All are welcome.
I was about to say, Councilmember Dodd, pressure's on. No, I'll just second everything everybody else has said, and also just thank you in advance for what the city manager mentioned, reaching out to the applicants that we aren't moving forward with and helping them try to figure out a path for their property. So thank you. I appreciate that as well. And I will consider a motion. Councilmember Alders.
I motion to move I move the recommended action. Thank you.
Second.
You started something, Councilmember Dodd. I've got a motion on the floor from Councilmember Alders and a second from Councilmember Dodd to approve the 2023 docket as follows. Decline further action on the Dirt Lord rezone without prejudice. Initiate the Pierce rezone through the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update. Decline further action on the Cottage Housing rezone without prejudice. And separate and move the Carlson and Drews amendment to the 2023 docket. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Alcabra.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right. We're going to move on to Agenda Bill 23033, consider adoption of Council Vision 2040, an endorsement of 3-year priorities. I'll wait till you sit down.
Yeah.
City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll introduce myself. No, I appreciate it. And I feel like the pressure is really on. It wasn't about saying thank you the last time. It's about how do I match the efficiency of the last two presentations. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Alcabra, and members of the City Council. As you've noted in your agenda bill tonight, I'm here before you to present the 2040 City Council vision for adoption and endorsement of the associated 3-year priorities. My presentation tonight is brief because this is your work, and it's great work. Both of these documents are products developed by the City Council at your retreat in January of 2023. And the full retreat report, I will note, has been posted at the city's website along with the city minutes and linked in tonight's agenda bill for anybody who wanted to read through the source material, either before tonight's meeting or certainly after. They'll stay there. The vision document itself, which is attachment 1 in your packet tonight, serves as the description of a desired future state for Bothell in 2040. And it looks at where the community is heading in the areas of connecting neighborhoods for one city, economic vitality, a community of trust and respect, a joyful and healthy way of life, building Bothell's beloved community, and environmental stewardship. These are all framed by the statement that you wrote: for a day or for a lifetime, no matter who you are or where you're from, Bothell is everyone's hometown. As agreed upon in the next steps of your retreat, a subgroup of members of the council met to refine the vision document prior to adoption. I just want to emphasize that that is the version that is presented to you this evening. Building on the vision is a set of priorities which help guide and provide areas of focus for the next 3 years of work as staff work to accomplish the vision. We anticipate that the priorities will change or evolve over the next 3 years. So while you'll be adopting the vision tonight, you'll be endorsing and saying, yes, those are the priorities. This is the starting point and the foundation. And we know that there will be updates on each of them, both in terms of the content, but you'll also be receiving updates, literally, in council meetings between now and 2025. So there will always be some decision points or opportunities to make adjustments. I want to touch briefly on the implementation as the next steps. While tonight is about adopting the vision and setting forward with these priorities, there will be more work to come, certainly over the next 3 years. But in the more immediate next steps, I want to just reiterate that the vision and priorities are already informing work that the staff is doing. Following the council retreat, a group of city staff met to review the priorities, and that team, which included the city's executive leadership team, has drafted work plans to move them forward. We'll be finalizing those drafts for presentation after tonight's meeting. We will also then return in May to present in more detail about those work plans and what you can anticipate being accomplished around your priorities. There's a high-level snapshot in your packet tonight that shows time bars of estimated start-stop times, and we'll update that along with the materials that we bring forward in May. I also want to just emphasize that while the foundational budget adopted by the City Council includes resources for many of the priorities that you've identified, there may be additional details that we get into and have discussions. So at that point, we will be prepared to identify any resources required to move the priorities forward with the ELT's drafted work plan. The resources we anticipate at this point would be one-time in nature. We're not looking at any major shifts in this first touch. The priorities will also help inform future budget conversations as needed. And so if there are other further investments, they'll be able to be tied back to your priorities. Also in May, there would be drafted budget amendments associated with these resources, and I just want to highlight that as well. We're not just going to come back and say this is what it's going to take. We'll be doing the work and being able to make sure that there's full understanding and disclosure of what the cost would be and how that fits within our financial plan. So you can anticipate seeing that as well. And then also the opportunity to, of course, share the scope, schedule, and anticipated first touches of when on all the priorities you would anticipate seeing these come back to council for the first time. So you don't have to be laying in wait wondering, when are we going to hear about this? So we'll come back and have that conversation soon. But finally, I just want to share something that I said to our staff team before we started working on those work plans and as we shared the vision and priorities with the group that was meeting. And I mean this with all sincerity, that your vision reads as a love letter to Bothell and to the Bothell community. And what I appreciate about that is it's an inspirational vision, and it really does help as we do work as a staff in order to support the council's vision for the community. And overall, I'm just very excited and grateful to have this as a guide and appreciate the ability to really point to the commitment that each of you have made as you've chosen to volunteer your time mostly to support this community. So thank you. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions and let you get to the adoption and endorsement of priorities.
Councilmember Zorns.
Thank you for calling it a love letter, because I think that's 2 words, 3 syllables. A good description of how our hearts beat here, and I think it really does help the city's heart beat a little stronger. Some of the conversation that we had, we were talking about how Bothell seems to be the last of its kind on Lake Washington, that small town feel. And as a city, we've done a good job, but we haven't done an exemplary job of protecting that small town feel. And I think part of that is knowing the elements of what it is to be a small town and how do we protect it and help it thrive. I love the parts about the community. We know that I'm a big neighborhood advocate because I feel a lot of our city pride starts in our neighborhoods and the people that we know and that we work with. So anytime that we can make community and neighborhoods stronger, Bothell as a whole is much better for it. We can't feel safe and secure unless of our neighborhoods and our city know that they can rest at night. And I think that this plan speaks to that very, very well. But I have to say, my favorite part, I think, is where I think we really nailed it was on the environmental piece, in environmental stewardship. The mental and physical health of the people and the environment, our flora and fauna lies in our environment. And a couple of phrases that I liked was honoring our terrain, to honor our terrain. We are a hilly community with little valleys tucked here and there. And anyone who's biked the hills knows that they can get pretty steep. And I love the focus, of course, on cool, clean stormwater, because our salmon and our wildlife are very much impacted. And the mention of heritage trees also really rang for me as well. So, and identifying urban forests is something that's one of our assets. So that was probably my favorite part. I hope people, if they haven't had a chance to look at the first groundwork for the 3-year strategy, ought to look, because there's some really good stuff that staff has identified and tucked in there. So, thank you to my fellow council members for some really good conversation. Thank you mostly to Kyle for setting us up for success. I don't think we could have done it had you not put so much thought and care into it, and we're all better for it, so thank you very much.
Somebody's got something more to say. Councilmember Alders.
Okay, it's me. This is really exciting to see this presented to the community, for us to be able to share this work that the 7 of us came together to do, and I hope, well, I know and I believe that my colleagues have listened to the community. And so while we were developing these are not just our ideas. These are not just the off-the-cuff, pie in the sky dreams that we as individuals have. It is very much influenced, guided, and inspired by the people who live here. And so I am grateful how holistic this document became through all of our efforts. I believe that it's a strong synthesis of the work that cities are supposed to do, but also the work that the city has been doing. I'm just really grateful to be a part of the process. It was really inspiring to have a facilitator there, to have brought in Kyle and to be our new city manager, and to say, hey, we need to do some priority planning and priority setting as a council. Can you help facilitate that process? And he led us on a really profound journey. And so thank you very much for that. And I'm also really grateful for our staff that not only did we have this retreat where we met and did this work that resulted in this document, our staff got together and had a retreat too. And they took our ideas and they saw what we had put together and then said, yeah, we can work on that. And then created this wonderful list of priorities and a work plan. And it's just amazing to see what a group of really capable, dedicated people can accomplish. And it's really, really inspiring to have been a part of it. So thank you, all of you on staff, for coming together. I'm really excited about the work ahead, what we have listed as our priorities. I'm especially excited about our parks and mobility plans, but most especially the concept of Bothell's beloved community. It very much came about as inspired by the work of Martin Luther King Jr., the King Center, and the King family, how they have continued to build upon his legacy and encourage each of us to be better to one another. And to have gotten support from the council to put that vision into words, and then to turn that over to staff who are going to help us put that vision into action is really, really amazing. I'm very much looking forward to learning from the King Center. It's something that's kind of on the later end of things, and I'm excited, so I want to see it sooner, but that's a thing that we can talk about later. But I want to share a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., because he spoke a lot about the beloved community. That's where the idea comes from. He says, "Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives." And I believe that change will be transformational. I believe that we will be more united as a result of it, that there will be good feelings of regard and greater civility for one another, more inclusivity, and we'll be able to really celebrate and achieve that joyful way of life that we talked about in our vision. I want the community to know that Bothell is beloved to me. It's why when I send out my newsletters, I address it to the beloved Bothell community. I'm grateful to be a part of this process, grateful to be a part of this community. And I'm really excited to see what we're doing next. So thank you.
I'm just going to wrap comment up if it takes too much longer. I don't know if anybody else wants to talk. Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. And this was a great process. We had great staff support from Kyle and Tony and Catherine and Tyler, our facilitator. And I think what's amazing about these visions is there's 7, and there's 7 of us, but it's not like Rami's piece, Jean's piece. It's literally 7 things we all had to agree on, we all refined, and we all worked together to build. So you can see different people kind of voices in there, and like stormwater. If I was going to pick something for you, it would be stormwater. But it's great to see how we all shaped it. But in the end, we all had to agree on each piece, and it's a collective work, and it's awesome. And I'm super excited to get started. So thanks everybody, and thanks to staff for making it happen, because these are just ideas, and we need the doers to do the doing. So that's the most important part. Thanks.
Davina's not on the council anymore, though. Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't write anything down. I'm going to go from the heart tonight. I've been on council just over 7 years now, and I think this retreat, Kyle by far was the best retreat we've had. We came from many different places, looked at life through many different lenses, have many different lived experiences. And I think Friday, for me, set the tone. We were able to speak freely, openly. I think everybody was heard. I feel like everybody was heard. And that's what makes this retreat and this vision special. And I think that's, if you think about it, it's what makes Bothell special. And so while we may not get everything that we want, we have a lot of work left to do. The fact that the 7 of us were able to come together shows what our community can do when we listen and they come together. The couple of the pieces that are important that stood out to me was around listening with an open intent and being intentional. The fact that we have a lot of things that we're trying to do and we may not have funds to do all of them. It is just that, it's a vision. And so it's up to us to implement that vision. But at the same time we're implementing it, listening. You and I had a conversation today, and after that conversation today, it made me reflect even more of the issues that we have in our communities with youth, surrounding youth. And we invest millions and millions of dollars into mental social services, affordable housing, homelessness, environments, and all these different things. And I always continue to come back to what can we do to be proactive for the youth so we don't continue down the same paths that we're continuing to go down. And I think this vision kind of hits home with that. Community, community, community. And it doesn't matter if you're a senior, a person with disabilities, if you're a newborn, we all have to be thinking and always looking out to the future. And so I am super excited to have been part, and I'm honored to have been part of this process here, this retreat. I'm super proud of this council and how we came together during the retreat. And that's not to say we're going to go on in the following year and not have issues or whatever, disagreements, but the fact that we can now, I feel, talk and each feel like we're being heard and listening to one another, that to me is how we're supposed to legislate. So I just want to say to staff, to you, and everybody who worked so hard on this, that for somebody who's been sitting here for 7 years, it by far has been the best process, the best retreat that I've had the opportunity to go through. So thank you.
You guys want to rock, paper, scissors for it or something? All right, Councilmember Mankey.
I'll go. Thank you, Mayor. I'll start off by saying last year we completed our biennial budget, and sitting around the table discussing the budget, I think some of us, especially the new folks, we felt kind of weird not having a vision or a plan or priorities. Part of that was just coming out of COVID. At that point in time, we were down several ELT members, and we had a lot of work to do to get to this point where we could really talk about vision and priorities. So I think we did a lot of really good work last year. We did a lot of good work with staff that was interim. We filled the roles that we needed to fill, and we passed a good biennial budget, which set us up for this conversation this year. In terms of our retreat, we had a great, I would say, breakthrough among council. We learned how to work together. Many thanks to Kyle and the consultant that was brought in to help us work through these priorities and the vision. Best visioning process I've ever been a part of, as part of any organization, I would say. Overall, I'd say the biggest thing that I'm most happy with in this is our vision statement. It keeps the motto of Bothell that's been around for decades and decades that we all know and love and we joke about quite frequently, but it also adds a little bit more to it with an eye towards the future, because we do honor our past and we do respect our past, and we respect all those that have come here so far, including myself in 1991 when this was made my hometown by my parents. People have moved here since, and it's also become their hometown. And it's become their hometown because they've gotten to know their neighbors. They've gotten plugged in the community. They've gotten plugged in at schools, in the colleges, and everything else that makes this community a great community. We are a small town, at least in terms of feel. We're getting bigger all the time, but we have maintained that small town feel, which I know someone else has referenced tonight, and that's been difficult to do, I would say. the cities around us have been getting bigger and bigger, and I know a lot of cities to our south no longer feel small town. Even to our north, some of them don't feel small town anymore. So I think small town is elements of our community. It's people. It's being able to walk into a coffee shop and see people you know, the grocery store seeing people you know, community events seeing people you know. It's keeping those things that make our community unique, like our downtown, our main street, our park, the parks in the north as well, our forests. Those are all things that we love and things that we should keep and things that we should value and treasure. So I feel like these priorities really look at those and keep those things, and our vision really sets us up for where we want to go in the future. So just thank you again to staff. Thank you to council. It was a great 3 days together, and I think the community's probably seen a shift on the dais up here as we've discussed things that have come before us. It's definitely been different since, so I've really enjoyed that, and I enjoy working with everybody here.
I was trying to delay because Councilmember McNeil stole my line. I was going to speak from the heart also. I guess I should have gone first, learned my lesson. As I was driving, my daughter was driving me here. Can you imagine? We came here, she was a little girl, now she's driving me places. Used to be the other way around. And we were, and both of us like looked at City Hall. We drove like we were driving by that street. I was like, can you believe I got elected to the council, City of Bothell? The guy with an accent, what is it? A little bit ago, I just came here to be a student and here to the US, and then got a citizenship and came here, formed a life, and my wife and I decided to move to Bothell when our kids were little because great school district, and we know why Bothell is great. And I love this vision because I was able to run for council and be very fortunate to be elected. And the second, for a day or a lifetime, no matter who you are, like somebody like me, that speaks to me. Where you come from, Bothell is everyone's hometown. I love it. 4th of July parade, let's do it. Welcome new neighbors. We talk about those things in the next, vision points that we talk about down there, the priorities we're talking about. It's amazing. It speaks a lot to me. As the guy who is with the accent, some people think I'm the Terminator. I tell them I'm not, but whatever. So be it. I love it. Everybody talked. Last year did not start out really well for us. I mean, let's be frank, as a council. And it would have been great to have this at the beginning of our terms, but we had this finally. And we turned out, we had very tough conversations, and we did it. We did this together. Obviously, we're 7 different people, thinking different thoughts, have different ideas, different backgrounds, different ways of looking at things, but we agreed to one thing. So thank you, everybody. And we made changes here with study sessions, because we found that format helps us have discussions. It's a better discussion, so we'll feel listened to, and we'll disagree. We don't always agree on things, but we are going to agree on a lot of things. We all agree to the fundamental things that we have said in this document, which is like 99% of the things that we all agree, the things that we all agree to. So that's awesome. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tony. Catherine, she's not here. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff, everybody who came together to create the work plan afterward. Looking forward to seeing that and seeing how we can implement this. Thank you.
I think this vision does a really good job of balancing, addressing the biggest needs that our community faces, while also honoring and respecting what we love about Bothell and have loved about Bothell, most of us for many years. Kyle, thank you for getting this process started. To echo what a few of my council member friends said about the opportunity to have a discussion off the dais where we're not just yelling at each other about some little thing that we disagree about, and the opportunity to realized that, like, there weren't a lot of arguments setting up a vision. Like, it's not like we were going, oh, this has to be here. Oh, what about this? There was no horse trading. Like, the 7 of us really share a vision of what we want. And I fully expect that we will disagree from time to time on exactly how to get there. And that's okay, but we all know that we have the same priorities, which is really heartening to me. Just thank you to everybody up here. It's been a rough year. It's been a rough couple of years before that too. And just thank you everybody for being willing to come to this with an open mind, willing to participate, willing to have some hard conversations. And we got to something that I think is really good. And I'm a lot more excited about the next year because of this process. So thank you all. That's all I have to say. Do we have a motion we need here? Nope. Oh, we do. We have to endorse it. Go ahead.
I move that we approve our 2040 council vision and endorse the 3-year council priorities provided in attachment 1.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Zorns and a second from Councilmember Mankey. I don't say that very often. I like it. To approve the recommended action as read by Councilmember Zorns. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name.
Yes. Yes, yes,
I'll
yes,
just
yes.
say yes at once. How about that? Councilmember Zorns, yes. Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alderks?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right, next up is a study session. And we are going to take a break in between here and there. It is 7:03 right now. We're going to reconvene in room 107 at 7:20. It's 7:04 right now. So 16 minutes. We're going to take a break, and we will see you over there.
Set. Oh, here.
All right, next up is Agenda Bill 23034, Middle Housing Community Engagement Plan and Schedule. Before I turn it over to the city manager, I just want to remind everybody up here and also myself to not talk over anybody else or have side conversations because it can be hard to hear over there. And for anybody over there who is hard of hearing, we do have some assisted listening devices there as well, but let's try to be as polite as we can for the folks in the audience so they can hear us. So this works out well for them and us. I give you some time to get back to your chair there. Are you okay? Awesome. I'll turn it over to you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor. And so we are with you again tonight in the study session format. And thank you for highlighting the change I was going to note too is, again, just to remember, there's a few things about this room, and I'll share this for the audience as well. The microphones are built into the ceiling. And so anything above a quiet whisper will be picked up and recorded. So as we talk, it's important to speak one at a time. And for the council, just know that the audio will be picked up. So with an audience too, it does help to project to the back of the room. And yes, the assisted listening devices are fair game. So tonight we have one item for study session, and that is on middle housing. As you recall, back in January and then subsequently on February 7th, staff had come and presented to you about the middle housing plan. Tonight, we're returning back to have further conversation and to share where we're at in terms of the overall middle housing plan. Just as a reminder, with this being a study session, there is no formal action being sought from council tonight. Staff is going to be capturing feedback and any other further comments on the draft middle housing community engagement plan and schedule. And with that, we are joined tonight by Jason Greenspan, our Director of Community Development. He is joined by Dave Boyd, Senior Planner in Community Development, and Sarah Frost, who is our Community Engagement Specialist also with Community Development. They're going to have a brief presentation, and we'll stay at the table to answer any questions that you may have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Thompson. City Council members, we're here as a follow-up to the February 7th study session on middle housing code amendments. As Mr. Standard mentioned, I'm here with Dave Boyd and Sarah Frost. And if we can get the presentation up on the screen. There we go. We go to the second slide. Okay. We're here this evening to get council feedback on the proposed middle housing engagement plan and schedule as outlined in your agenda bill. Slide. I'll just keep this slide up as a reminder on the subject matter that's at hand. Last month, we saw direction from the City Council on two different options proceeding with code amendments as referred by the Planning Commission. One option was to formally introduce code amendments in March and conduct a public hearing with City Council voting on that code before April 1st. The second option, which City Council selected, was to take additional time through July to engage further in two-way communication with the community using a variety of tools and platforms, and to develop a schedule that would support code amendments moving forward to a public hearing by July. We're here tonight to present those items to you and to get your feedback. Also on tonight's consent agenda, there's an item that would amend a contract with our consultants at OTAC to support our work through the next 4 months. Now, we know many questions came up on February 7th, and we're hoping that we'll have fuller conversation and answers for those questions in the coming months as we initiate the schedule with our consultant support. A grant that we secured from the Department of Commerce will be used for OTAC to develop a racial equity and anti-displacement report, a market analysis, and help with comprehensive plan amendments that will be consistent with our overall 2024 update to Imagine Bothell. So now I'll just hand over to Dave, and he'll get further into the schedule and the products that OTAC will deliver. Sarah is then going to talk about our community engagement strategies that include a mailer to all Bothell addresses, social media engagement, and a community forum.
All right, thank you. As it states across the top, I want to emphasize that community engagement will occur throughout this and has occurred throughout this process going back to November of 21, and even before that when we started the work on the corner lot duplexes, which really led to all of this. So we heard at the last meeting that there were those that wanted to move forward very quickly. There are those that wanted to take it slow, and the consensus seemed to be to try to come up with a schedule that would get us to adoption of both the plan and code amendments by the August break. And that's what we put together here for your consideration. So, and the work is ongoing. OTAC has been working with us under our current Commerce grant, so there hasn't been a break in the work, and that work will just continue seamlessly through June. That's when the Commerce contract needs to be completed. Staff will be picking up the ball and carrying it following June. So starting off with March, we're going to continue at least with a couple more walking tours, and OTAC is already working on the race and social equity work, the market analysis, and the comprehensive plan amendments, which were actually identified back when we did the corner lot duplexes. So we have a starting point there already. In April, we'll take those comp plan amendments to the Planning Commission in a study session, more study sessions, and then as the legislature develops whatever new rules that they're going to pass on, will be following that and also looking at potential code revisions from their recommendation forward. In May and potentially continuing into June, we'll have a community forum and the Planning Commission public hearings, and then coming back to council in June and July for study sessions, and then definitely in July with the public hearing and adoption of the comprehensive plan and code amendments. Again, all targeted for potential action before the August break. So just to go into some of these pieces of this in a little more detail. The racial equity and anti-displacement report is a new requirement from the state, but it's something that we wanted to to tackle in any case. It'll include input from the market analysis and from the community-based organizations that we're working with through Arch and 4 other Arch communities. It'll be at the end of March is going to be a deadline in our grant for a draft of that report, but that will be updated and informed by our ongoing community engagement. And it will also kind of set the stage for the race and equity work that will be done for the comprehensive plan update and engagement plan. Also underway is the middle housing market analysis report. That's the next deliverable that we have on our commerce grant. It will also be issued, a draft version issued in April for discussion and updated and informed by the ongoing analysis and community engagement. As I said before, it's going to work very closely hand in hand with the racial equity and anti-displacement report. And it'll address some of the questions that have come up to date, like what are the tax impacts, and to identify, potentially identify implementation programs that can go hand in hand. Once we have the code in place, how do we encourage creation of middle housing in an equitable way? And then the comprehensive plan amendments. That's the last deliverable, but it's in a way the first thing that we'll work on, building on the analysis done for the corner lot duplex amendments that were deferred. That was the decision at that time. Planning Commission will have to review this and make their recommendations back to council. And that will be part under this plan as part of our 2023 annual comprehensive plan amendments. But we will be doing it with an eye to the 2024 update to make sure that it's consistent with that and fits in seamlessly with those updates. So with that, I'm going to just highlight a couple of things. We are tracking pending legislation as of today. House Bill 1110, which really is the one that's known as the Middle Housing Bill, has passed the House with revisions. There's another bill, House Bill 1337, which specifically deals with accessory dwelling units, and our middle housing legislation that we're bringing forward also addresses accessory dwelling units. So I wanted to also touch on this. It's passed the House and has been introduced in the Senate. So both of those are moving forward at this time. And then I'd like to turn it over to Sarah to talk about our engagement plan.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having me. So the engagement plan, that's sort of the whole purpose of this, was that you all decided that we needed more engagement. So we're doing that through a number of multifaceted tools, and they're going to be used, we're going to use them all differently, but they're all going to work together. So we're going to inform the community through things like the walking tours, through additional website information, just what is middle housing, how can they learn more about it, what are we actually talking about? That's the inform stage. So we're gonna amp that up. If and when we get the engagement portal up and running, if it's up in time, we will definitely use that as well as a tool. That's still sort of TBD, so stay tuned. One of the things that we heard from you was that you wanted a citywide mailer. We're gonna do it. So we'll be working to design one of those and get that out fairly soon. We'll be using social media to remind people how they can get involved, where they can get involved, where information can be found, and other tools. We break these up into buckets: inform, consult, collaborate, and report. Those are important to determine what we're talking about when we're engaging. When we're in this inform stage, we're giving information. We're saying, here it is, here's what we're talking about. The consult and collaborate are both receiving information in my mind. It's a two-way communication. That's where that engagement is really happening. So we're going to be using a listening session or a community forum for that purpose, and OTAC will be helping us set that up. Really open-ended conversations with people. We could possibly be doing a survey, and this is where the public hearings come into play as well. We'll be collaborating with ARCH and other community-based organizations. We'll be working with developers to see how this affects them or how they can utilize these new code amendments. And then we really want to address that broader Bothell community, because we're hearing from some people that they didn't know about it and other people that they did. So we want to hit the places where we didn't hit them before. And then we'd like to report back. We want to, once all of this is through, we're going to report back to the community and say, this is what we heard, this is how it influenced, or this is what we took from that and how we used it. That'll be done through website updates, council and planning commission meetings, and other forms of communication. And with that wraps it up. So we're seeking feedback on the proposed engagement plan and the schedule as outlined in your agenda bill. I think I was supposed to say something.
Can I talk?
Okay.
First off, thank you for the mailer.
Yeah.
And I, marketing is not my spiel, it's my son. So I'm just, shooting. If we can I think we had talked about, often, at least this is the way I deal with my mail, is I'll see something come in the mail, I'll go, and then I wait for a second. That's a little bit of a big budget ask for our city. So can we put out, like, on the city website and social media, like, be paying attention to your mailboxes, this is coming. It's really important that you pay attention to this, because we're only going to be able to let you know about this in a mailer one time, more diplomatically and more succinctly, but something along that effect. Yes, on the survey, I'm glad that you're thinking about a survey, and an engagement portal. I heard the caveat that maybe that will happen.
So may I address that? I don't know the proper formats here.
Please do. We probably all had the question.
Excellent. So the engagement portal, we're working on that actively right now. What the timing of that and the launch to the public is the part that it may not apply to the middle housing conversation, but it will apply to other conversations soon.
And Sarah, I was going to just report back. I think last week the council heard a little bit more about the comp plan process and Kirsten outlined how this portal was going to be used for the comp planning process. And I think that's what Sarah's referring to here, is trying to accelerate that so that it'd be available early for middle housing as well. So it's the same tool we talked about last week.
Same tool. I do have to say, comp plan, I know, is a very complicated piece. And so doing this piece before we fully address the comp plan, I know there's going to be a lot of eyes rightfully looking at this on, are we putting the cart before the horse? So you got staff and planning commission and council are going to have their work cut out for them. That it really is not putting the cart before the horse. We don't want to have a whoopsie when we go to do the comp plan and go, maybe we shouldn't have said that. And then I don't want to get into a discussion on the finer points of missing the middle, but I'm really hoping that we can have data that shows what affordable housing do we have existing in the city right now. That might be, I know we have some of that apartment data, but that might be our manufactured home parks, that kind of thing. What is the percentage between roughly single family homes that we have out there and the ones that would be called affordable? What does that look? What do those numbers look like? I would love to know that at some point in your spare time.
And that'll be part of the market analysis that's being done.
That'll also be part of the larger conversation in the comprehensive plan. So it'll have sort of two pieces to this. We can talk about it in the context of middle housing, but as we do the housing element for the comprehensive plan, we're clearly going to need to get much deeper into the affordability question and meet some of the targets that are being set for us by the counties.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We're not getting called on.
Study session.
All right.
Our honor is taking a break.
Well, Councilmember Zorns asked a couple of the questions that I was hoping to hear about. And I guess I'm going to ask more questions about the mailer. I'm very sensitive to the idea of just how expensive those mailers are. Having worked in a print shop, it was owned by my grandmother, and I did a lot of the like postal area or zip code sorting things anyway. It's a lot of paper and it costs money. But I'd like to know like what sort of information is going to be on those mailers. Are we going to be sending it out before one of the walking tours? Are we inviting people to a walking tour? Are we informing like how much content is going to be on this? Like,
good question. Honestly, we're not going to overwhelm people in my mind at this moment, which may change. We're probably not going to overwhelm people with the content on the mailer. It's going to be, and please correct me if, informational and also where to go. So to me, it's a directional mailer. If it coincides with one of our, like a community forum, that would be awesome. Now, timing, TBD on all of these for precise dates, but that's sort of the general idea, is to encourage public participation, but also say you missed the date or you didn't check your mail for 3 weeks, you're also not going to be missing out on anything crucial in that regard.
Thinking one of the goals would be, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, if we're able to include a QR code, for example, that takes the recipient to our webpage. There you'll find information about the community forum, walking tour if that's happening, maybe some preliminary reporting on the market analysis, the anti-displacement report. So it'll be cool whether you choose that QR code the day that you get it, or if you pick it up a week later and go, what is this thing? Oh, I better look at it and look at the details. It can serve both purposes.
yeah, and so if somebody picks it up, even 3 weeks after the fact, that website would still continue to be updated, and so it would actually have even more updated information than maybe when it was first sent.
Yeah.
Very cool. Will the community forum be recorded, and will the video be made available on that website after the fact?
We are working with OTAC on the forum itself, so the forum details I can find out.
Okay.
I would like.
We did do that with the community forum that we did early in the planning commission process. So I would expect we would, but
Do we still have the video of that earlier?
it's on our little housing webpage.
Okay. I'll have to go back and look for it. Okay, thank you. Awesome. That'll be, well, and it could be really interesting to compare the two to see like we're kind of where we started and this is where we ended up. Thank you. I was going to ask about the time frame for the engagement portal. You answered that beautifully. Thank you very much. And way to be ambitious and try to like accelerate that and get it done for this too. Like, it's okay. It's okay. If you don't. Like, yeah, it's okay.
It needs to be done right,
Which is the important part. I respect that. Then you mentioned collaborating with Arch and developers, and something that I'd be really interested in seeing, and I don't know if this is possible, but at one of the study sessions coming up, April, June, somewhere in there, could we hear presentations from Arch and the developers about their recommendations and hear directly from them about how they've collaborated and what feedback they're giving?
We can take a look at that. I think there are times when for a council meeting, in terms of, it depends on the format, that might be something like a study session, or that could also be an alternate format that I know the council's been interested in. We'll want to be making sure that we're cognizant of time, and that can be orchestrating multiple outside presentations can sometimes consume your agenda. So we may have to make that its own meeting, but we can take that feedback. If there's interest, we can see, is there an opportunity for some way of hearing directly from them? Otherwise, staff will absolutely be compiling that information and getting it to council and the community.
I've enjoyed Arch presentations before, and this seems like an appropriate time to do that. So I'm glad that you're willing to explore it.
Yeah, thank you. And those are my questions. So thank you for answering them.
I'm going to build on something you said, talking about the mailer, and I appreciate the QR code going to a website, but not everybody is comfortable with getting information on a website and consuming it that way. So I'd also love to see like our neighborhood information boards stocked with more detailed information and just having people know like you can go there and get more, there'll be a pile of them on, at the front at City Hall, like just ways to get like tangible information people can look and read. And also, I know the dates aren't set yet, but as they are, I would love to know the schedule, especially like as social posts go out and people might reach out and be like, what does this mean? Or I read this and I have questions. So that way we're all equipped to have those conversations so that it's not like, where did you see that? Because that can be kind of an awkward. So otherwise, thank you. Like, I really appreciate the attention to all different avenues that people might get information. I think that's super important. So it's a really good plan. Thank you.
Can I interject? Because you just put a thought in my head. Can flyers go in the library?
Probably.
That's a great question.
There are a lot of flyers in the library. I imagine they can make room.
Yeah, it's really easy to get a flyer at the library.
Or even the post office too.
The court building.
There you go.
Something in Snohomish County.
Yeah, Snohomish County.
Bruce Widely.
At my door.
On your streetlights.
I'll just put them on the pirate ship.
Free library.
I'm glad you brought up that not everybody is comfortable with QR codes or web pages. So we will include other ways, including, who to talk to if you want to come down to City Hall and just find out more in a more direct way.
Thank you. I think sometimes it's hard for people to think that their question is worth going down and talking to someone, but the more we can encourage that, I think the better people aren't kind of out there with like, here's what I think it is, but I don't want to ask.
I have to tell you, planning department, years ago, when I first started getting involved with, I think, Dave, you would probably be able to know who I'm talking about. When we were first talking about the downtown Siberia plan happening, and I was having a little purple panic attack. And one of your staff members who no longer works at the city was the sweetest human being in walking me through and helping me understand the language of what was going on. So you guys are an important piece that meets with the public.
Rapid fire. I've seen him typing for half an hour, so. The walking tours, thanks. Payback. Thank you. The walking tours, are they only happening locally in Bothell? Are they happening in other communities?
So far, just here and part of the reason is that we want to show people that, it's often referred to as missing middle, but it's right here. It's not missing. It hasn't been built as much lately, and certainly it hasn't been built lately at all in single family zones. But we have a good opportunity here to show people where it's actually happened. And for the most part, works. There are some good examples and some bad examples. One thing we have talked about, we haven't really put together, is a list of other good middle housing examples around the area. For example, cottage housing examples in Kirkland. And so that's another thing we'll work on, and we can put that out there and people can go and look at those on their own.
Okay. Well, I'd be really curious to see, and at least even if we're not doing the walking tours in other cities, know which ones have housing types, middle housing types, and not just in cities like us, but cities that are not like us, right? Like Rainier Avenues and the Federal Ways and the Rentons and the Kents, and they do have middle housing. It's just a little different, but I would be curious about that. I would also be curious to know if we're doing walking tours in single family home neighborhoods.
The tour that we've been using skirts along the edges of a couple of single family zones. We don't really go into those neighborhoods because the newer ones haven't allowed middle housing. So I think you'll find around the region, getting back to your other communities, any of the older traditional single-family neighborhoods, you'll find a mix of middle housing, because those were developed before single-family zoning became as exclusive as it is now. So, yeah, like I said, we just skirt along the edges of single-family areas.
Yeah, I'm just, curious to know those who have tried it previously, what successes they had when they did it, and where they are, 20, 30 years later, what it looks like. I'm really curious about understanding what we're thinking, where we're thinking we're going to be doing this, and what neighborhoods are affected. And when we go walk and we see what's working and what's not working in Bothell, if that's not including areas that we're going to have it in the future, to me, it's like, I want to know what that could potentially look like in the future. I want to see those neighborhoods as well. Say, this is not developed as middle housing right now. Based on what we just saw, this is what could be here as well. Just understanding that dynamic, I think, is important for community members to understand. The market report, is the market report going to reflect when you say the racial equity piece, is that going to say how that's going to affect members of the Bothell community specifically?
That's the hope, that they'll be able to identify neighborhoods in Bothell that where we might have experienced displacement of relatively affordable housing with these amendments. So, and I found it interesting that in some of the state legislation that they're offering examples for cities to exclude certain neighborhoods that they've identified as being potentially threatened by displacement, exclude those areas from housing requirements that are being proposed. We don't know right now if we really have areas like that, or if that's or what other tools we might be able to use to protect those. But that's part of what that work will do.
Yeah, so it brings up an interesting question for me, is that, I think Bothell's population is 6%, if I'm not mistaken, roughly close to that. And if there's a piece in there to help with that displacement piece, is it going to say that people of color are going to have an opportunity to buy in this community? And then what are we going to do to ensure they can buy in this community? So are we saying that we're going to put policy into place to ensure that they have access to those middle houses? I don't know the question. I'm just asking the question, because to me, it opens up another question, which is, we're saying we're doing this for people of color, but then are they going to, like, if there's a bidding war, they really have an opportunity? So I don't know the answer to that. I guess it's a question. We're talking about race and equity. I want to make sure that I fully understand what we're saying there.
It's a great question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I'm bringing it up because it made me think about it. Like, you're saying it's going to be for people of color, but then if they can't afford economically to buy it, then it's still not helping. Citywide mailer, all for the citywide mailer. I agree. I think you don't want to have a lot in there that people can't digest. You want to direct them somewhere, which then leads me into, we're directing them somewhere, and what are we directing them to? And the council body of 7 come from different perspectives, different backgrounds. We look at life differently through different lenses. And that's part of the great conversation we heard about earlier with the retreat. But the way we get information is, if we are always getting the same information on this as positive, and we never hear the negative, then are we really able to give information to our community and it be transparent? So I want to make sure that when we're providing information, when we talk about levies and stuff like that, we have to be neutral, right? So I want to make sure that the information we're giving out is pros, cons,
And it's not from a perspective of we should be doing middle housing, but a perspective of what middle housing is, the pros and cons, how it can affect you, just ensuring that it's not just, oh, we got to do middle housing. So the survey, I'm like all for a survey, but a survey has to have intentional questions that are going to bring back intentional information. You just throw a survey out there and say, yes, I believe everybody should have an affordable house. And, yes, I believe in affordable housing and middle housing, but there's no context behind the fact that middle housing doesn't necessarily mean affordable housing. And how do we separate different projects? And if we rezone, what the effects are. So I think it needs to be, in my eyes, it needs to be more informational, driving to the point of what are you really saying yes or no to, right? The portal, I know it's a big undertaking, but I think the portal and comp plan and middle housing, I think if we can somehow make that work, I think it would be an amazing opportunity. And then we can really show that we're diving in this and doing everything possible. Councilmember Zorns brought up affordable housing. What does that currently look like in our community? Yes, I would love to have a report on where we are with affordable housing, what those housing types are. If we currently have middle housing, we talk about doing tours. What is that? What types are they? I think last week we had our study session, and something that came out of that study session that concerns me is that when we talk about rezoning things one way because of a project that we love, and that project can potentially change and become something completely different that we're not thinking about. I think that's a big, for me, it's a big red flag and a concern or pause. So I got a couple more. Mommy, you were right. I was typing away. That should be okay. Take my heart next time.
Chill, Ronnie.
I think we've heard from people. Our community members have come and they've spoken to us both pro and con to this. And I think when we go out and we engage with our community, I think it's important that we engage out in our community. And even though we do the surveys and the mailers and all these different things, I really hope that we can find an opportunity to go meet people where they're culturally at. I say culturally, a lot of seniors may not come, right? A lot of different ethnic backgrounds may not come. They may not want to participate or feel they can participate. So finding a way to get to them and making sure that they know that their voices are being heard regardless of who they are within our community, I think is going to be important. And schedule, to me, this to me is a necessity. We need to find different housing types. But I think it has to be a process in which we do take our time, because we can't undo what we're doing. And there's been, we all know, laws that have been passed in the past few years that have had a huge impact and a negative impact on people, in some cases, people of color. And so I think it's important that we understand where our communities are coming from, both pro and con, take the time to listen and engage, and not just say, we got to do this because everybody's got to do this. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to find a way to reach out to our community. And I think if we can make this a pilot to engage with our community, it gets back to the work that we just did on our retreat. So I'll just leave you with the last piece that I being in the industry that I'm in, I wish there was a magic wand. I wish there was a magic wand to create affordable housing. But I can tell you right now that as long as the market rate is driving housing, as long as there's commodities that go into housing, As long as we have labor shortages, we cannot get plumbers, electricians, HVAC contractors. Until we figure out economic inflation issues that we're having, we're going to continue to be fighting affordable housing. This is not something that we've drawn up today. This is something that past councils have fought through for 100 years. We have not changed the way that we build houses. Manufacturing's changed. We found ways to build things cheaper in manufacturing plants, but not in construction. And we can create different housing types. But today it may be affordable at $1 million, $750,000, I'm hoping. But if a person has a piece of property, city of Bothell, today's times, worth $1 million. There's a 2,500 square foot home. And they sell that property to a developer. They're going to build that, tear it down and build a new one. You're going to at least recover the money for the property, and then they got to recover the cost to build new. Which then means that we've taken something that's affordable to some out of inventory to create something that's not affordable to more. So just want to make sure that we all take pause and think that we got to find solutions, but we also must understand how construction works. How do we find solutions? So I just wanted to leave you guys with that because it's been weighing on me heavily every day. I mean, listen, if I could go out with my own hands and build affordable housing, I would. But it is today's times. Market rate of a piece of property not allow support. Now, also permit fees, but we're not going to go there.
How does Habitat for Humanity do it?
How do they do it? Subsidize.
Donations.
Subsidize housing.
Yep. Volunteer groups that go and do it, sweat equity from the homeowners. It's.
Well, the land cost, isn't it the big cost?
Land cost is land cost, yeah. A lot of times they get some land donated to them.
So there are ways.
Yes.
That's not market rate housing.
We talked about
But I think,
the point of affordability.
and that's an important story, right? Because there's different needs at different levels of income, right? Like there's a certain, percentage of AMI where you have to have the subsidy to get housing that a family can afford. I think one thing to remember too in this is if you own property in Bothell, but it doesn't work for your family, but you can't afford new property in Bothell, you're stuck. You can't upsize. There's not a lot of downsize options. So what this also does is you're not selling to a developer. You can also take your house, which is just your footprint, right? And turn it into a duplex or a triplex for your generational needs. So I live with my father and my brother and my son in a multi-generational home, and it's not a duplex. It's just one house. We share a kitchen. That's not for everybody. Like you think about your parents, your siblings, some of them you might want to share a house with, some of them you might not. And I think there's harmony in saying, okay, we're going to share this house. We're going to go in on the construction costs of making this 2 units, building another kitchen, whatever you do. But it's not, we're not going to be on top of each other all the time. So I think looking at how many families in Bothell are already existing as sort of 2 or 3 family units in one big or small single family home, like this allows people to take the property they might have. It might have been willed to them, but they bought it a long time ago, or they bought it before their life changed. It's something to keep in mind as we look at what people can do with what they own, because we see people moving away because they can't, what they own and what's available can't meet their needs in Bothell. And that's where we lose people, or people who grow up and they can't settle here, right? But maybe their parents have land or a house that could work with something that they just can't do under code. So the piece about the cost of construction is very well received, right? There's a lot more that has to go into this, and it's hard for us as one city to really fight this battle. But at the same time, like just opening up to people, like they own the property, but they're restricted in what they can do. Like imagine the people we could keep if we had just a few more options. So I just, not to counterpoint, but to add, there's another narrative there about what people can do in their homes. And I suppose I'm especially sensitive to that as like a single parent who, things change. I'm on a single income and everything. Like there's a lot of phases of life where what you could afford changes, whether you can afford more or less. It's never a constant, upsweep in what you can afford. So just remembering that people might buy something and then be at a different phase where it needs to do something else to work for them.
I think you're spot on. I mean, take your house as an example. You're there, right? And you want to remodel it so that 3 families can live there, right? And you can do that, right? But you can do that now. You can literally remodel your home right now. You don't have to rezone your home to remodel it, because you can literally just create different rooms in your house. Right? You don't have to rezone it to create spaces for 3 families. You have upstairs, downstairs, you can create a separate entrance downstairs. I guess what I'm saying is, it's when we rezone something, it makes it to the point where somebody else can, the intention of what you're saying is a good intention, but somebody else can come in and change that intention. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying, yes, we need to make sure that people can do with their homes what they want to do. In some cases, they can build ADUs now in their backyards. They can do these things, but rezoning allows others to come in and do what the unintended consequences. That's all I'm saying.
No, totally. And I think the zoning comes into the, like, if you need money from the bank, it has to show like, okay, if I do this to my house, it's gonna increase the value. If you kind of, you know, if your uncle can build you a kitchen somewhere and make it all work out, like maybe that works for now, but if you go to sell that house, then you're in kind of a weird spot. So there's, you know, it depends on if you need funding, how you're gonna get it done. There's, you know.
There's something to be said just for the independence of somebody having their own mailbox, their own kitchen, their own address, their separate space. And I know that a lot of, I think we've got more than half of people in their 20s right now are still living at home. And I think just the ability to give them a separate living unit gives them a measure of independence that they don't have if mom and dad are just, you know, remodeling their house.
Across the hallway. I have a question to clarify what rezoning means. My understanding is that the middle housing amendments are not rezoned. Or not, like, so can you clarify for me? I don't want to be incorrect here.
Technically, we're not proposing rezones. Some will say that if you change what has been a single family zone to allow duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, that's a de facto rezone. But technically, we're not rezoning. We're changing what code says you can do in these zones.
That was my understanding. So we're basically allowing more flexibility in single family zones, but we're not changing the zone. So it's a very narrow permission of what can be done in addition to a single family house in these zones that have existed for a really long time. And correct me if I'm wrong, like, right, it gets technical. And I think that there can be a lot of confusion if we're saying to our community, we're rezoning single family zones.
It would be expanding the uses that are permitted in a particular zone district, but it doesn't change some of the fundamental requirements on lot sizes, setbacks, things like that would still carry forth in those same zoning districts. So it isn't a rezone, David is right, but it expands the uses that would be permitted in a particular zone.
Well, and that's why it doesn't actually, like, because the building sizes are very similar and similarly shaped and similarly sized. That's why it's like, it's still the size of a single family house in a single family zone. You're just saying you're able to divide it now into units that can become income generating or can allow more freedom and independence or better caregiving or whatever the uses are.
Right.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna be a little bit of a troublemaker. The question is, and I think everybody's bringing up a good point on things that need to be included in the discussion, but the question is, you want to know about the schedule and the community engagement plan. So
I was going to ask about
these side discussions are great to have, but I feel like we're kind of missing the, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's good.
I was about ready to say exactly the same thing. Back to the discussion.
This is a good discussion, though.
It's a great discussion.
We haven't had it. I mean, anytime we have that, and we save time from the previous agenda items, so.
It was a study session, right? We're supposed to be able to just
Yes.
talk freely, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I just want to make sure that what doesn't get lost is the point of, we want to know. And I think people brought up a great point of clarification that's going to have to happen in this community.
Yeah, because it's part of the communication plan, the very important question, like, what are we actually doing?
Right.
Are we flipping everything upside down, or are we just keeping everything as is and just
Changing and what
allowing-
isn't changing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but to get back, David, I want to make sure that I'm clear, because you said this is not rezone, okay? And it's not a higher use, but it is a higher use. because if I can take a single family home and I can tear it down and I can build a duplex, right? Now I have two single family homes. Correct? Two independent families, two independent tax parcels, correct? They're paying taxes independently, right? So technically it's not rezoning, but subzoning, right? Because you're allowing a higher density, right? And when I say density, your footprint, I could tear a 3,000 square foot house down and build a 5,000 square foot house, right? That's not increasing density, is it?
No, not technically, but, and we get into semantics, but so technically an upzone would be going from R 9600 to R 7200, or, you know, R 2800. What we're not proposing changing any of the zoning designations. We're proposing changing what you can do, what uses are allowed in those designations. We're also not, as Jason said, we're not changing the size of what you can build, but we're changing the number of units that you can put on a.
So if I have a single family home, 3,000 square feet, just talking out loud here, and I'm allowed to use so much square footage of my property, and I'm allowed to go 30 feet high, right? And currently right now I have a 3,000 square foot home. I could literally tear that down and build, if it's allowable, right? If I'm within my footprint, I could build two 3,000 square foot homes. If I have the square footage of the lot.
Yeah.
Which they do today anyway, right? They take the one house and they take it down, they build 10.
100%. They maximize their usage, right? And so what I'm saying is you're gonna have two versus one, correct? Or three.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
You're saying two single family homes are like a
I'm
duplex?
saying I agree with Amanda. And I think for me, thinking outside the box right now, if I could tear my house down and build each one of my kids a house on my lot right now, split it into three, that's amazing. Amazing opportunity for my
Talk
family.
to my dad and see how he feels about it, though. No, I mean, we're, you know.
Questions, back to Jean's thing. So I have questions. But can we have something to talk about? We will have opportunity to talk about the details, I think. Why is Planning Commission having more studies, public hearings and study sessions on this topic when they've already done their recommendation?
Because we're now moving forward with comprehensive plan amendments. So far, they've been focused just on code amendments. So
this is the next level. Like, okay, had the comprehensive planning not happened, don't have to do it. If we didn't have to do it next year, what are we going to do? What approvals do we need to provide now for middle housing? I mean, it happens to be coinciding with comprehensive planning at in this period at this time.
it's true. So we are starting on this major periodic update, but what we're trying to do to stick with the direction that we got at the last session to be able to adopt the Planning Commission recommendations for the code amendments by August is that we also need now to tackle the comprehensive plan amendments. And then, and like I said, we're looking to do that in a way that will be consistent with the amendments that we'll be making with the comprehensive update.
Because my question is, why is so my follow-up is, why is the community forum, public hearings, May and June and July to have even more, well, I guess we have to have council sessions, but why are things over 2 months, not?
Well, so Planning Commission will likely have at least one study session, one public hearing before it goes to council. So that already is probably a 3-month process. And we want to get through the study session before we do the noticing, which needs to have 21 days. So there's all sorts of timelines that we need to fit into the process. Well,
Okay, thank you. Because I personally want to see if we can do things, focus things more, so we can do things a bit faster. That's my thing. I mean, have more, to, talk to people, not over 6 months, but over months, for example.
3 months. Like 3 months.
2 months.
Talk louder.
How much loud? Oh, sorry. The other question I have is the OTAC and community engagement and the collaboration column that you had in here. What does that look like? Do you have an idea?
Great question. I don't have specifics at the moment. Dave, I don't know if you can speak about the arch and community-based organizations more, but yeah.
So OTAC's already on board, so we've been working with them now for off and on for over 2 years. And we're now having weekly meetings with them to make sure that we're moving forward as quickly as we can. But they'll be doing a lot of the work on, and they have a sub-consultant for the market analysis, Eco Northwest, who's done a lot of this work throughout the Northwest. OTAC has their own race and social justice lead who's going to be leading that part of the work. And then Arch, we're working with Arch, and their main role in this is coordinating the work with between the 5 Arch communities that are involved and the community-based organization. And they've put out an RFP. They've identified a lead CBO, which is East Side for All. And
what does CBO stand for?
Community-based organization. And then their proposal identified a number of other community-based organizations that they'll be partnering with on this effort. And they actually just reached out to me today to see if there were any Bothell-based groups that we'd want them to work with. So that work is kind of just getting started now as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that process works out because as you've discovered, you've seen Dave sometimes saying we're going to meet on Tuesday at 10 a.m. You're only going to get so many people showing up to the meeting. So you might have to have having those tours, walking tours, might have multiple of those sessions so that you can get as many people to participate as possible and not have the same voices over and over. Saying the same things.
And one thing we're looking for from that outreach to the community-based organizations is what are the events out in the community that we should go to engage, going to where people are at rather than asking them to us.
Sorry.
Okay, we talked, Sandra, you're welcome to go if you want.
I will go, thank you.
So I had 3 quick things as everybody spoke. I really appreciate, Jenny, your question about is this an upzone? And then I also think it's important to remember that if someone says, I don't want an upzone, the answer isn't, well, it's not an upzone, right? Like that's not a conversation either. So I appreciate that we're talking about like it's terminology, but that's not the whole story there, right? And so I also, speaking about like what could this look like as you were talking about, if we can get some possibilities, right? So Kirkland, at the last walk, we had a member of the Kirkland Planning Commission who talked about they haven't seen a lot of building after they passed their code in 2020. And there are other, if we look at municipalities of a similar size, of a similar age, like across the country, there's always going to be a local story that influences the building and stuff. But if we can look at what would it look like take a map of every parcel. You have that in your back pocket, right? No, I'm kidding. And just like, okay, if we saw 2%, of our lots take advantage of this, here's what that might look like scattered across the city. Here's 5%, here's 15%. So people have one way to visualize changes that might show up. Because I think on the tour, you see what is possible, but not what that might look like in our neighborhoods. And then the other thing is talking about recording the community session. As someone who watches recordings, let's do a virtual one that we record so that everybody's on a mic and talking. And then the in-person ones, I think if you record that, that's sort of pandemonium in most cases. So, and I would love to also just see an option for virtual versus in-person to just so that people can go as they're allowed, right? Because to Rami's point, different times worked. You know, sometimes you can do it while your kid's eating dinner from home, but you can't like take their dinner and have them eat at the table while you're at City Hall doing the forum. So just different options. And then the other thing, speaking about the racial equity and anti-displacement report, I know that's a new state requirement. If there's examples that we can look at to see what the product is expected to look like when it's done, and even with the market analysis. So before it's done, if we can kind of see what it might look like, you know, I think that would really help a lot of us visualize what we're waiting for. Because right now we're all kind of building up an idea in our head. You know, it's like before Christmas. That's a little too excited maybe, but and it's like you know you're waiting to open the presents and stuff. Like let's make sure we're all on the same page about what we're gonna get. Because if we're 2 months out and we get one of those and we're like, well, that's not anything what I imagined. Like it's a bummer we could have avoided. So that was my 3 things. Thanks, Mason.
No problem. This is a big lift, and I'm really happy with what you guys have brought us. And I just wanted to say thank you first. This is thorough and a pretty efficient time frame, which are both things that I wanted to see. I feel like we have this dynamic in public comment where people who know what it's like to have to acquire housing now are saying something very different than people that haven't had to acquire housing in a couple decades, like me. My home ownership is almost old enough to have a beard. I did that for you. Is there a potential as part of this to do some sort of education for people who haven't had to go acquire housing on the market and to just like kind of give a here's a lay of the land, kind of like that, you know, over half of people in their 20s live with their parents for the first time since the Great Depression. Like, here's the median income, here's the median home price. Like, is there a way that we can have a little bit of just information that will hopefully draw some empathy for the people that are asking us to do something and we're trying to help? And I don't know if the answer to that is yes or no, but I would like to do that, but kind of.
Oh, that was a market analysis.
Well, I feel like.
Expected that from a market analysis.
I feel like so many times we have this discussion and it's like, oh, housing has to be more affordable. And then we get into like this argument about what does affordable mean? And, you know, if we look at new construction on a tear down lot, you know, from a fourplex compared to a new construction, you know, single family home, we're enabling less expensive housing and more people to live here, even if it's not truly affordable. I really liked what Councilmember Aldrich said, kind of all the different reasons and potential use cases outside of affordability. And I'd like to be able to just sort of highlight what those are and what we're trying to accomplish to the community and the problem that we're trying to address as part of this.
One of the things that we wanted to work with OTAC on was a toolbox.
Yeah.
That would look at different situations and how different households are differently situated. Whether you're an existing homeowner, whether it's a small developer, a large developer, somebody who's renting right now and really aspires to home ownership. You know, that kind of toolbox could get to that issue. We could try to introduce some more educational components to that as well.
I talked to somebody today who just bought their first home out in North Bend, and they live here now. And they like living here, but for $800,000, they could buy a house in North Bend, and they couldn't do that here. And, you know, somebody like that wants to stay in the community that they're in, like, even if it's not affordable, I mean, it's an $800,000 house, that's a lot of money. But that's the difference between being able to stay in our community and not. So yes, something like that would be awesome. I know PSRC did a study on the House Bill 1110, and they have some data that we potentially could steal in terms of expected development. I think their number was before the most recent amendments, so it's probably lower than this now. Over the next 20 years, they would have expected, or they expect 5% of developable lots that are affected by this to redevelop over that 20-year time frame. So like, you know, if there's a way we can say, hey, in 20 years, as you look from your door, the most likely scenario is that one of these homes that you can see is going to have a couple more doors. Like, and if there's a way we can kind of have the conversation about what's real and what's most likely.
5% is less than that, actually. When you look out your door, you say 5% and have.
Well, I said if you have 20 homes out there, you can see. I don't know if I can see 20 homes or not.
You do live in a mansion.
Well, you know. Is that what we're calling split levels now?
Yes.
Yeah. Aspirational.
When you played the game of life, split level was always the like bottom tier.
Yeah.
Like you do not want to live in a split level. And I was like, look at me, I live in a split level.
No, and I mean, that's my list. That's just a couple things. I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to have this conversation with our community, and each other as well. And just take the next few months and talk about trying to address some of the biggest problems we face as a city.
I think I'm the last one.
Can I sneak in a question building off of Mason's?
Go for it.
Awesome, thank you. Jason, you mentioned the toolbox, and I'm super excited about that. Will that also have sort of some of the visuals? I know that a lot of members of our community, when they've gone on these middle housing walks, they're like, but how do I build that? Like, will there be examples? And I know that at some point in the future, part of the implementation plan was here's some plans that you could build. Here's some models that you could follow. Will we be able to get any of that in this portion of the engagement plan, or do
I want to overpromise based on the scope of OTAC. Confirm what their scope to do in terms of visualization.
I think we will be providing visuals of what can be done, whether it's plans. That's the next step. And we've been talking for some time now about pre-approved ADUs, especially detached ADUs, and perhaps piggybacking on some other communities that have done that. But that's taken a while and we're still not really close to having that. And that would be, an even more complex step with middle housing. But we will be using visuals to better explain what can be done and how it relates to what's allowed now. And then this is just the first step, really. We first allowed ADUs, attached ADUs, before I started here in 2005. So I think it goes back to the 90s. And we've slowly tried to remove some barriers to ADUs, and we're seeing some results. We're getting more being built, but there's still a fair amount of work to do. And the same will probably be true with middle housing. It'll be a very incremental process.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You're on.
First, I just want to say thanks for hearing us and coordinating the mailer. I know it's not cheap, and I'm probably the most hawkish budget person here in this room, but I think when done right, it can be helpful for getting information out. So thank you for that. During prior study sessions, there were some questions around council goal setting for this policy, and I just wanted to make sure we were going to have those conversations so they could be included in the whatever's being put out there for the public. So I guess that's probably a question for the city manager. Is there going to be time for us to get time on the calendar to talk about that, if it's affordability, attainability, or other policy goals?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if there's mutual interest about the council, we can certainly look to add that conversation, and I look to CD to be here to facilitate it. And it sounds like that might be something we would do in a study session format. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, we talked about it during one of the study sessions, and for any policy, you should have a goal around why you're considering it, what your goals are, so that you can then measure against your goals. And if we haven't had that conversation yet, I think that's important to have, and it's important to include in anything we present to the public.
What would be helpful to to help facilitate that conversation, like what would you want teed up more than what you have right now in hand to be able to say, here are some of the things that I'd like to make sure that are clear?
I think we've gotten a lot in the prior packets. I don't know that we would need anything additional. I think it's just discussing, I mean, the affordability was brought up first. I think we've kind of shifted from that, given that we know it's not what we consider traditional affordable housing. It's not subsidized. It's not a certain percent of AMI. It's housing that's probably going to be, or has potential to be, at a lower market rate than other market rate housing. So that could be like an attainable type of goal. I had a whole list of things that had been talked about in prior council meetings as potential policy goals. So I can bring that up and discuss it, or.
What I was also wondering is that maybe we have that information and we can pull that together, and I won't put staff on the spot to do it tonight unless you want to, but we could perhaps bring something back and say, here's what we heard, just to have a confirmation conversation.
The one thing that concerns me a little bit about that is when we make demands of change that we don't also make of the status quo, really what we're doing is biasing toward keeping things the way they are right now. So like, I guess the question I would ask is, what are we trying to accomplish by keeping things the way they are right now?
I don't think that's the goal. The goal is discussing what do we expect to get out of this policy that we're bringing forward, and how are we going to measure it in the future? And if we don't have that, we're just making decisions with no plan to.
As long as we measure it against the other option, which is to do nothing, and all of our problems keep getting worse.
It's like the no change option. Whenever we're looking at options and staff has like the table, there's always one that's like no change, everything sucks, right? That's why we're looking at other changes. I'm not saying that applies here, but we look at like traffic. If we don't make this road bigger, people aren't going to go anywhere, right? So I think as long as we evaluate not changing versus the change we're looking at.
That's what Ben is proposing.
Well, I think it's kind of the
And I
whole,
mean, that's what I'm saying too. Like, as long as we're
Speaking
doing
the same
all of the same things for keeping things the way they are right now, I'm totally content with that. That sounds like a little bit of a lift. I just don't want to do something and make demands of change that we don't make demands of keeping things the same way that they are right now. So
Let me see if I can understand what you're saying. You're trying to say, what is the goal that we hope to achieve that with this? Give it a time frame and come and say, did what the action that we do, how did it meet our goal?
Yep, that's any policy decision you make, you should have some kind of measurement attached to it to see if what you were intending to do actually occurred, if something different happened, so you can come back and adjust if there's adjustment if needed. And even to take it a step further, a lot of things we look at what are the options available, what's on the menu. Example is the back nine of the Wayne. When we looked at that earlier this year, we looked at 4 different alternatives. And then we selected a preferred alternative based on those 4 options. What we're doing here is we're looking at one alternative from the status quo, and we're not looking at what would we do if we did everything? What would we do if we did the transit-oriented development, which the state is proposing? What would it look like if we did something completely different, like density clusters around certain areas where there's infrastructure and opportunity for that development? So we're taking a very narrow look at it, and that could be okay. I mean, I don't know if we want to take a look at all the other options as well, like we have done in the past with other things, but we need to be able to measure and say, what's our objective with the policy? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to follow up in the future and see if we got what we intended to get?
It's not just this one you're talking about. It's talking in general.
yeah, I mean, that's
In general.
what you're describing, I think, is the comp plan.
Yeah, that's the housing.
That's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to kind of go over all of those different options, and I would assume that we will have multiple different options based on conversations we've had so far. So like, that is absolutely something we're going to do. This is just sort of a narrow, bumping up the minimum unit per lot floor in the neighborhoods we do have.
And I think he's just saying, let's have a goal attached to
Yeah.
that. Something we could measure.
The comp plan's coming after this. So the comp plans are going to be different and later. So what I'm saying is, if we're going to consider this
Dave has an
this
idea.
code change, then we should have goals around it and measurement around it to make sure, again, that we're getting what we intend to get. Or if we're going to get something different, is that okay? Or we just need to be able to measure the outcome of it.
I just wanted to say that the comp plan also comes before this. All of this work is based on policies in our existing comp plan. And I realize that's not a comp plan that this council put together, but it is the one you've inherited and that we're working with as our goals and policies and actions. And then as part of this process, we're going to be looking at comp plan amendments. So we will be looking at those goals, policies and actions and how we need to change those to be consistent with what's being proposed.
So there are, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying there are goals with the current comp plan, which we're going to try to align this new.
Yes, and Jason presented those, both comp plan goals and housing strategy priorities that are consistent with what we're doing here.
We definitely remember all of them.
I guess one concern I have with that is I've been watching council for quite a long time. I've never seen those reported out to council on, did we meet the comp plan goals? What became of what we intended in that plan? Did we hit those things or did we not? So I just want to make sure we're being intentional about what we do and not just taking what is put in front of us and here's information and then we take a vote. Like we need to have a plan with this. We need to be thoughtful about it. I know Planning Commission has done a lot of work on this. This obviously didn't come together without a lot of thought and effort. Same with staff, but as council, as we're making a decision, we need to have a plan. We need to have a way to measure. We need to be intentional with why we're bringing this forward and what we expect to get.
You bring up such an important point. As we get further and further away from the comp plan adopted in 2015 and a housing strategy adopted 3 years later, if we don't report back to the city council on a routine basis, how do you know how well we're doing? And that's why I wanted to reflect back on that. I reported out last time. And I think it's a reminder to us that we need to continue to, circle back to the comp plan and the housing strategy, because I know developing a housing strategy is one of the priorities for the vision statement that you adopted this evening. So we'll make sure that the next time we report back here, we'll circle back to what the comp plan and the housing strategy goals are and come up with some ways to measure those and the progress each time around.
I think the other points I had were, wanted to echo Councilmember Dodd's comments. If we're going to do community engagement, listening sessions, whatever it may be, please let's do one in the northern part of the city in our area and include folks up north. And then also homies, and also echo what Councilmember McNeil said about providing both sides of an issue. When something is mostly pro and the facts are all pro, that looks suspect just from a candid point of view. And even something as simple as a lottery, lottery winners should know that most of them go broke within 4 years. And while it may look pretty and they may get the facts on the front end and sound good, doesn't always go that way. And there are things that could be negative about it. So as long as we're being open and transparent and sharing all the information, not just the positive things that could happen from this, I think that's really important. Let people decide on their own. They're going to decide anyway, but give them all the facts. Even if we don't know if something is going to cause a problem, if we can say like, this is a consideration, like the property taxes, for instance, that's one thing that people will want to know about. So even if we don't know the answer, we can say like, this is a consideration, something to think about. We just don't know.
We try to really implement a rigorous peer review process of anything that goes out the door. Sometimes we get a little bit in an echo chamber, frankly, when we're writing reports. And so we like to make sure that we have others review it to make sure it doesn't have any kind of a slant one way or the other.
That's great. That's all the questions I had.
I'm going to piggyback real quick off of the analysis. I think the other thing too, so like Ben and I are closest in age amongst the group. Our entire lives, Bothell has had single family zoning, but it's not existed for the entire life of the city. So sort of understanding what were the goals and implementing it here, what were the outcomes that we already see today, right? So understanding the history of how this zoning evolved is also important because it's not just we exist now, we might exist this way in the future. It's what have all those decisions, and I don't mean like, hundreds, like 100 years of decisions, but when we're talking about this zoning, what has that led to at this point? Because we can say we want to change this or whatever, but one of the things to me that's pretty important is and I don't know how to say this, it doesn't sound like a talking point, but like restoring property rights. Like you own a property, it's increasing what you can do with it. And that's hard to measure, right? Well, 100% of people who own property now have more rights. Like that's an easy, you know, that's nothing. So I think sort of understanding a little bit of that story in Bothell, especially to those of us who just don't remember sort of a time before, right? So that would be another part of talking for goals, is understanding what were the goals when other decisions were made.
And that leads me into, you know, where did we come from? Where are we trying to go? And ensuring that our messaging is not excluding folks, right? So we have members of our community that are newer. We have members of our community that have been here. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, I don't think anybody is against anybody in our community. That's just how I feel. And I want to make sure that we're using a messaging that's inclusionary, not exclusionary. I'm not against you because you just moved here. I currently live here. I'm a member of this community. I love my community. I welcome you as my brother and my sister in my community. So, you know, we hear the dynamic, right? The pros and the cons. And we say, you've lived here. You don't have empathy for those who are trying to get here. That's a message that we're spinning. We need to make sure that we're clear and our community understands that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that because you've been here, you don't care about those that are trying to get here, right? Because I've been here and I want more people. I welcome more people to come here. And I will tell you, as a person who's owned his home in this community, I struggle day to day to stay in my home, right? Things are getting more and more expensive. You know, inflation is hurting all of us, right? And so I don't want our community to be pinning one side against the other, those who can afford, those who cannot, because a lot of people do care. A lot of people do dedicate their time and their volunteerism to do things within our community. The other thing is on Councilmember Mackey's about outcomes. Legislating should always be about outcomes and measuring those outcomes and who we're trying to help, right? And understanding who we're trying to help. You know, we passed an MFTE, right? What was the outcome of it? We heard from Cascadia tonight about micro housing and creating different housing types. So understanding as we go through these processes and what we're trying to do, understanding those outcomes and being intentional about who we're trying to help, who we're trying to bring and make part of our community, and not excluding anyone to our community or anyone who lives in our community. I think is also a message we want to make sure during this process that we're actually intentionally telling our community, because we've heard from people talking about affordable housing. We've heard from people that live in housing, that live here currently, and I couldn't buy my house again today. Couldn't afford my house today.
I have to agree, but you know, Doorbelling's not that far away from my experience. And I have to say, everyone, homeowner or voter's door that I knocked on their door and they had been in Bothell for a long time and engaged me in a conversation would say, I couldn't afford to buy this house. My children can't afford. So I think people probably are more keenly aware of what housing is and isn't for them, than it might surprise you.
So just to be clear, I bought my home at a time in which I could afford my home.
Right.
It was what I could afford to buy. There was a time in my life where I lived with 3 other guys in an apartment because that's all I could afford to live. That's all I could afford to live, right? We're each paying $700 a month to live in a tiny little apartment, right? That's what we did. And then I just happened to get lucky and continue to work hard, 2-income household, and I was able to save enough money to buy my home, right? And today's economic times are much different than they were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into this, and making sure that we are intentional and understand that everybody's coming from a different economic background is so keenly important. Right? So I want to encourage us to have positive outreach to our community. Whether you're for it or against it, it doesn't matter. Let's make sure that we're spreading a positive message, that we're a welcoming community. Because as soon as we say you're not welcoming because you live in a $2.5 million home, what do we literally say? What we're doing the exact opposite of what we said we were supposed to be doing. So.
Don't forget the Senior Citizen Center outreach.
I think it was, oh, you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. Reaching out to seniors, and that might be a good.
Also, the adult day center, it's a different audience, and that's, I mean, my brother lives with me because he can't live independently. That's a good audience for people who might want another unit or another close together.
We got lots of ideas.
I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Would anybody, I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Mankey. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, we don't need to do a roll call for this. Speak now or forever hold your peace, and I will assume unanimous consent. All right, moving on to council conversations.
Did we vote?
Yes, he said we don't need to.
Okay,
I can say it.
Okay.
Thank you, Laura.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Yes. Linda Field.
Yes.
Mankey.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd. Yes. Deputy Mayor O'Connor.
Yes.
Council conversations.
I wanted to say something. During the Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, I was going to say something to Robert. And I thought, no, this is going to make me get on the spot. But I just wanted to say, as a special ed teacher that was in the system at the time that this Awareness Month was proclaimed, when I'm in the schools, it's really frustrating because the same conversations are happening on how do we better move the needs of kids, and so many kids not getting the services they need. I won't name the school, but I remember one, moving this table, sat in her wheelchair for a good hour with no instructional, because the system wasn't there to give her the teaching. And I think on some level, we all have disabilities that we step in and we help each other out. And I think I really appreciate having the proclamation that we had here, because it reminds us to be human. And to pause long enough to be human and step alongside someone to hear them. Take extra time, don't rush them, allow them to speak and get their thoughts out. Find out, is there a spot where they would welcome help or not? But, I hope we can, as a society, as a city, we can keep moving forward and helping our people with disabilities. I just wanted to say that.
I really appreciate that. I was thinking during the proclamation that my brother was in North Shore in different levels of special education through the end of 2012. And then my son entered at Sorensen in 2018. So we had a 6-year break. And, I think any special education family has a story about, misses and things, and they're far too common. And I think we have such a great community here with the Day Center, with the Wranglers. And my brother was a Wrangler when it was Woodinville. They were going to lose their home in Woodinville, so the Senior Center took on that program. We have the Alyssa Burnett Center. We're very commutable to Children's. That's, between North Shore and Children's, that's why my parents picked Bothell. And I think we have to honor that. We're a great place to live if you need services. And it's so important that we acknowledge that part of our community and we serve our community. And that's as simple as just when we see people out in the community, just making sure that if someone looks or seems different, we're still as welcoming to them as we are to anybody. I can't tell you, I ran into my brother at Starbucks because he's very independent and he's like, oh my God, you're here. And talk to me now because I'm very loud and he's very quiet. And, just seeing him interact with the Greases and everything, and they're meeting him on his level of just, quiet politeness, not overly chatty. And I talked to one of the managers and she was like, yeah, we noticed he doesn't like a lot of the excited chit chat that we do, but he keeps coming back. So we figured he must like us. And I was like, that's exactly it. And that's all it takes. It's a great thing that we have here. So that really resonated.
Wait, was that a plug to Starbucks?
Sorry?
Was that a plug for Starbucks?
It was no, I should have said a coffee place, honestly, but, yeah, it's just, we have a very awesome population, that we have to take care of, especially just because of everything we have.
We are Haley, as you said earlier.
What's that?
We talk about we're talking about development, but I expanded it to also the wheelchair and the mobility, challenged folks. And we expanded to other folks.
Just, I think what separates human beings apart from the rest of creation is we have the ability to communicate ideas and needs, and we don't always communicate it the same way, and giving each other grace to really hear and ask more questions. Someone's really good about asking questions. You challenge me to ask more questions instead of just assuming I know what the answer is going to be. But just giving people space to get their thoughts out it's a big deal, and it makes a world of difference between your relationships with people and meeting real needs of what it is to be human. So. Anyway, grateful for this proclamation today.
It's a big one for my family as well. And like, as a parent, I'm like in it. I'm in the middle of it. And it's some of the hardest things that we've dealt with. So I'm grateful to be in a community that cares and that wants to make sure that my kids can access what they need. So it's good to hear this proclamation because it's very real for us at my house.
I don't have a gavel.
You have a Fresca can.
Oh,
No. Like he doesn't need any encouragement to be loud.
You know what would be great if I can just put this out? I am looking for my next hero.
Yeah.
You guys throw out a hero in case you're a personal community hero, please.
High-end micro condominiums. That's the answer. Basic Econ 101. You can spend 4